Good evening, Michaels and Goblins. Welcome to Insomniac. I am your host, Miss Frey. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day or night wherever you are. And I hope that you're ready to learn about a new cryptid. So, yes. So, which cryptid do we have in mind here? Well, you know, as Falling in Reverse says, I'm not a vampire, but I feel like one. Yeah. So, but yes, that is the subject of our thing tonight. And yeah, could you be a vampire? I don't know. Let's learn about these weird, creepy, and strange facts together, and then you can decide for yourself. So, a little bit of back history. So, vampires originally were just undead creatures who feed on the blood and energy of other creatures. And they were actually more like zombies up until the 18th century. So, just kind of nasty, undead, mindless, bloodthirsty things. I mean, some of them did have some intelligence to manipulate and everything, but it was more primal, more animalistic than a lot of what we see in film and books and things today. So the swarthy, pale, charismatic, sexy lovers of humans didn't really come about or even start to be a thing in cultures until about the 18th century. So yeah, that being said, on with fact number 1. So, porphyria. Porphyria is actually the number 1 illness that a majority of older cultures defined as being the signs of being a vampire. So, what is porphyria? It's a liver disorder, in which porphyrins, which is a type of enzyme that your liver filters out for you. And it builds up in your body because your liver is no longer functioning properly due to many different things: alcoholism, drugs, just illness, and all that sort of thing. It causes pale skin, light sensitivity, fevers, chills, seizures, delusions, high blood pressure, purple urine, and random bleeds, like nosebleeds, bleeding from your tear ducts, bleeding from your ears, pretty much any place you could have an orifice. In fact, when the porphyria gets super duper bad, people will actually start sweating blood out of their pores. So yeah, it is almost purely a genetic disease. And for those of you that have blue blood in your veins, you're some of the main culprits for this particular disease, because yes, this was a big one that made many European royals go absolutely batshit bonkers out of their mind. So, and most of them unfortunately have very painful lives because of porphyria. But yeah, so basically, since its discovery in the mid-1800s, this particular disease has been dubbed the vampire disease. So that is where we start. Number 2, other diseases that have been labeled a possible sign of vampirism throughout the ages were tuberculosis, influenza, the plague, rabies, anemia. So pretty much anything that had to do with your nerves and could make you hallucinate or would do something funky with your blood or anything like that, or your skin, you could be labeled as a vampire. There was tons of reason why they labeled people as vampires. Honestly, the reasons why they labeled people as vampires were just about as numerous as they labeled people as being possessed or being witches. So Yeah. Yeah. The strange, crazy things that society and the human brain comes up with to try and explain phenomenon they don't understand entirely, right? Right. Number 3. First documentation of vampire origins was actually from Mesopotamia. So yeah, like I said, been around forever, been around for millennia. They believed that battles with demons could lead to possession. The possessed was then considered a vampire. So there was one particular demon, and you have to understand, in Mesopotamia times, demons aren't necessarily all bad. They were usually kind of two sides of the coin. In fact, the idea of a god and the idea of a demon in certain cases in Mesopotamia were interchanged. So there was a particular female god / demon, and her name is Liliu, which is where Lilith in the Hebrew Bible comes from. And one side of her, she helped people with different things as far as heartache and money problems and stuff. But the other side of her went out at night and ate babies and seduced men and sucked their blood dry, and also seduced women to recruit them and infect them with the demon god spirit. So yeah, very, very interesting and a little bit creepy. All right, number 4. Many cultures still stake, decapitate, and burn the corpses of relatives and members in their community that die from blood and nerve-related diseases. Seriously, it still happens today. It still happens today. You can look it up. In fact, I think the earliest one I saw was like the mid-90s. And that was it over, of course, in the Serbian area because of some of the history and stuff that went down in that area of the world, Serbia very, very much believes and fears demons and vampires to this day. Even people of modern culture and scientists in this area still very, very much fear possession from a blood drinker or a demon or a zombie or a werewolf, a lycanthrope. They very, very much fear this shit. But yeah, because of this, desecrated grave sites have been found all over the world. And how different cultures desecrated their deceased loved ones and relatives always varies. Some of them, they cut the heads off. Some of them, they cut the limbs off so they can't, get out of the grave and run away. Some of them, they would put weird stuff like iron nails or silver coins or an obelisk, which is like it's an iron or silver egg of just raw metal into the mouth of the corpse. Or they would put sais and swords and shit in certain configurations around the body, and then they would take the cremated body and arrange the bones in some sort of way. In fact, the skull and crossbones thing that's really popular with pirates, that's where that came from. It's actually a configuration that was popular during Roman times that they would do to victims of diseases that they thought led to vampirism, like the ones I mentioned, porphyria, tuberculosis, whatever. That was a pretty popular way to lay your community members' bones in the ground so they don't come back and haunt you as a vampire. And yeah. So yeah. Crazy, strange shit. Number 5. The romanticism of the character of the vampire first appeared in 1819 in John Polidort's story, The Vampire. Okay. So this is kind of a weird, creepy, and strange fact because around 1819, of course, we had civil unrest with things like revolution, and we still had a lot of disease going on, and the world building up to that precipice point of World War I. And so there was a lot of strange things going on, and there was still a lot of mystery in the world. And it's weird and creepy and strange because when John Polidort wrote his story, The Vampire, which is what inspired the film The Sunrise that Nosferatu is in, it kind of revived the idea that vampires in the historical mythological sense still walk the earth and still prey upon humans and our livestock and heaven knows what else. So I don't know. It's kind of like the whole thing with what is his name? The guy that did the radio show about the alien invasion that everybody went berserko about. Starts with an O. Is it Oscar Wilde? I think it's Oscar Wilde. But anyways, it's kind of like that. It's weird, creepy, and strange to see how quickly and how effective mass hysteria is, because there was actually a mass hysteria that went on during this time. And the other thing that makes it interesting and strange is that there has been kind of a mass hysteria about vampires or lycanthropes, which is werewolves, were-creatures, zombies, some sort of highly infamous cryptid every century since the dawn of humanity. And it always correlates and coincides with war and civil unrest. So it's just a lot of interesting cultural correlations with how we handle fear. Number 6, going to modern times now. Today, there are 5 different recognized vampire types. Okay? These are the ones that are most widely recognized throughout the world as people who identify as vampires. Individuals that identify as vampires, these are the 5 types that are most identified. And it is sanguinarians, sanguinarian vampires, energy vampires, bloodborne vampires, spirit-borne vampires, and cursed or possessed vampires. So what all these mean? Well, sanguinarianism is you feed on blood. Simple as that. Energy vampires are those that they claim to feed on the energy of others. Okay, so they drain energy from other life forms, especially human beings. Bloodborne vampires are those that it's a genetic thing. Like, for example, Porphyria is in your genes. Then you're a genetic vampire. Spirit-borne vampire is an individual that displays the more psychological disease traits that goes along with autoimmune diseases and goes along with different neural and bloodborne diseases that just makes them more prone to habits that we identify as more vampire culture habits. Okay? And then the cursed and possessed. The cursed and the possessed means that it is speculated that you have done a ritual or something in which you tried to invoke a spirit or a demon, and now you are cursed and possessed by that demon or spirit, and they are driving you to want to drink blood and shed blood. Okay? Now, sex magic vampires fall into the category of energy vampires. That's why they're not really identified in this. The reason being is because the biggest, the whole point of using sexual activity in order to trade energy with your partner is that's what you're doing. You're trading energy. You're trading bodily fluids, but you're not trading blood. So that's why there's a difference there, and that's why sex magic vampires are considered energy vampires. So yeah, pretty simple. Number 7. Many vampire groups exist today, and they're usually called clutches, broods, clans, or covens. Yeah. The whole coven thing actually came about because of the whole thing with King James. You remember in my witches video, and I said about the thing with the witches, and King James wrote that book about, what was it, the Daemonis Maleficorium or whatever? Yeah, vampires are in that book too. So yeah, coven is kind of actually a universal term to describe groups of cryptid creatures that are meant to come do harm to humanity by the will of the devil. So, but yeah. So, but there are actually clans, covens, groups that exist today. Most of them are underground. Though some of the groups have become quite famous due to public intrigue, honestly. For example, the Vampires of Austin in Austin, Texas, they have grown great acclaim because of their king and queen, Miss Daly, especially Miss Daly, because she does a lot of work as far as charity work and modeling work and stuff. So Logan, her husband, and her have done a heck of a lot of interviews with a whole lot of different places, trying to educate people on modern vampire culture and, you know, the pros and cons and what it's like to actually join a vampire clan, and why you would want to do so. So, but yeah. So yes, still around today, many individuals still identify as vampires. Number 8. There again, number 8 goes right along with number 7. There are religious sects, S-E-C-T-S, religious sects that worship Vlad the Impaler as a god. So, for those of you that don't know, I'm sure that the majority of you do know if you are a fan of horror fiction or horror history, that Vlad the Impaler, he was actually a king. And he was a king in Romania, I think. Wasn't it Romania? And the Prussians and the Persians were at war with the Romanians for a very, very long time. The Persians wanted to conquer their land and stuff, and the Romanians were not having any of it. So Vlad, to the Persians, were just brutal, and his favorite thing to do with Persian prisoners of war was to, you know, strip them down naked and beat them up a little bit to tenderize them, and then take them and put them while they're still alive on the top of a spike, and then slowly but surely their bodies would slide down the spike and impale them. So it was a very horrible, painful death. And of course, these stakes were displayed by the hundreds outside of his castle walls. And it was, I mean, it was a demonstration of, hey, don't screw with the Romanians because I'm willing to go crazy to protect my people. And actually, a decent amount of people that live in Romania actually call him Vlad the Conqueror, or they call him Vlad Vlad the Hero, because in his home country he was a hero. So yeah, it's like, but because of the fact that he used such bloodthirsty practices to make the impression known of that he was so dead serious about protecting his people and his throne, he was speculated to be a demon or a monster or a vampire by the Persians and some other countries. So, excuse me. So, people nicknamed him Vlad Dracul, or Vlad the Devil. Okay? And so that's where the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula came about, and thusly he entered the realm of vampire lore. And so nowadays, there are actually worshippers, especially in Romania and actually around the world now, for people who are vampire fanatics and lovers, and they worship him almost like on that realm of gods of vampires. Like Lilith would be considered one of the gods. She would be considered the mother of vampires, and Vlad would be considered, like one of her sons or one of her princesses, or not princesses, princes, maybe one of her kings. And so it's a really interesting religion, kind of how do I put it, a sub-branch of vampirism, the religion. So yeah, very interesting, very gory. If you like blood and gore stories, read about Vlad the Impaler, and read about some of the interesting rituals that some of his followers, his worshippers, use to commemorate him from across the world. So, number 9, the kink of bloodplay. So, bloodplay was actually considered illegal in most cultures until the 1980s. So, here's the funny thing. Here's the sitch. Things like assault and all that sort of thing, of course, have always been illegal. But bloodplay itself as an intimate act was considered illegal until about the 1980s, at least in the United States. In the UK, it's still considered highly controversial, and I think it's still considered a misdemeanor. But for most of the first world countries, once the United States were willing to consider bloodplay an actual fetish, an actual sexual kink, then they were like, oh, okay. And it became so as a legally sanctioned, recognized thing in the 1980s when vampirism became an actual religion. So, yeah, there's a religion of vampirism. And like I said, there are lots of different houses, as they call themselves most often, or clans or covens that are kind of underground because of the social bias, because of people that don't understand what they represent and don't understand exactly what they do. But yes, they are a government-sanctioned religious organization in the United States of America, and thusly bloodplay, which is the consensual exchange of blood between two sexual partners, is also legal, and as long as it's consensual, it's not considered assault. Number 10. Okay, so, yeah. So you got these consensual donors and stuff, right? Because, okay, you got the vampires, so what, are they just going to continuously drink from each other? No, no. Actually, most of these organizations and clans, they also have a very coveted and special subclass in their coven, their clan, and these donors are called swans. Okay, so swans are people that voluntarily are submissive either to one particular vampire in the group, or maybe submissive to that specific community. They are actually under contract with that particular clan or that particular host, you know, which is the vampire they're contracted to. And they have to follow certain rules in order to be considered a viable swan. You know, they have to eat right. They have to make sure that, you know, if they're, you know, getting blood transfusions or they're having, you know, sexual interactions with partners besides being part of the vampire world, that they use the utmost care and protection so that they don't get STDs and illnesses. Just, you know, some groups that the swans are required to have certain nutritional requirements, the whole 9 yards. So it just depends on the group. It depends on what the swan is willing to, you know, willing and wanting to do as far as their submissive participation. And just, yeah, you know, it, yeah, swan. Number 11. As I just mentioned, modern vampires are bound by very, very strict rules of consumption, okay? So most modern vampire groups, especially if they want to continue to keep their sanction as a religious group, they have to have very, very strict rules about consumption, okay? So the idea that a house of vampires is a bunch of murderous, maiming serial killers is a bunch of bunk. Because otherwise they're not going to be allowed to stay for long. In fact, most of those contracts do state that if you know of anybody in the group that goes to assault or maim or murder somebody while they are in the bounds and contract of the house that they're, or clan that they're a part of, they are required to immediately contact the council of that house, and B, immediately urge the council to contact the authorities. Okay, so yeah. And like I said, the swans, the donors, they're all willing participants that have their own type of contract too. So if they see anything shady or sketchy going on, they are bound by that same thing. They have to tell their superiors, and then they have to contact the authorities, because it's a very guarded privilege to be able to practice blood play and have it sanctioned by the law. And most practicing vampires don't want to go by that. Not to mention, majority of people that identify as vampires are extremely territorial. And so it kind of goes against their grain and their instincts as individuals, because they wouldn't want it done to them. So why are they going to do it to somebody else? That's just asking for trouble. That's asking to be possibly, well, punished, exiled. And trust me, if you get exiled from one group or organization, especially if they're one of the more popular ones or they are one of the more prestigious ones, every group in probably a 200, 300-mile radius is going to hear your name and know about your ass. So you'll be excommunicated for ever. if you break those particular rules. So yeah. Killing and assault is strictly forbidden. So yeah. Like, while they may empathize with the darker aspects of culture, the goth culture, the metal culture, the horror culture, yes, there's very, very strict sets of rules. And dirty vampires aren't sexy, okay? It kind of ruins the mystique, and it ruins some of the appeal. It's just not sexy, okay? It ruins it. So yeah. No maiming and killing, strictly forbidden. Number 12. Now, if you have joined a really good house, really good coven, or brood, or whatever they call themselves, then they will educate you on the hazards and the health concerns and things. But that's why number 12 is important, is that people have to understand that consumption of blood or energy or bodily fluids comes with the risk of diseases and pathogens and, poisoning, manic depression, hysteria, bipolar disorder, and even death. So, yeah. And like I said, if you decide that you want to join a house or a coven or something, and they're a good one, that should be one of the things that they do before they ever even let you sign any contracts, to be a part of the organization. Because, yeah, science is science. And science has proven that the things that make you a vampire or make you considered a vampire can cause damage if it's done improperly. And you have to be willing to take care of yourself and take care of the other members of your house. So, yeah. Number 12. Watch that consumption point. And number 13. Okay? So, mainly this. Number 13. While being part of a community may seem great, careful analysis and research should be done before choosing to join a clan or even participate in Bloodplay. There's, like I've said, there's social stigmas, there's disease. You could possibly, somebody could go off the rocker because they aren't doing, because one of the things that I know of in some clans and houses, they do programs where they check in on your mental well-being and stuff to make sure that you're not getting some sort of weird, messed up PTSD or turning into a sociopath. Because if those happen, unfortunately, you're out. You're out, because you can't be mentally unstable and practice this safely for yourself or others. You just can't. Okay? So yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it. So if you are a person that's genuinely interested in joining a house or a clan or a coven, ask questions, what their policies are, what sort of things as far as emotional health and cleanliness are required. That sort of thing, especially if you want to be a swan. Whew. Yeah. But, so yes, do your due diligence, do your research, do your careful analysis, find out what your requirements for membership are, and do all that stuff first, because it will make your journey so much easier, so much safer, and so much more enjoyable. So yeah. And those 13 facts are just the tip of the iceberg as far as vampires go. There is a plethora of facts, history, creepy stories, knowledge, lore, you name it. You know, so many different subgenres and subcultures that go along with the concept of the vampire. Just vampires and the different variations of what they are and what they do and how they do it have fascinated us the world over. And I think part of the psychology of that is, especially the more we humanize the vampire lore, the further we go along, is that primal urge to be immortal, for one, and to have the excuse to satiate certain primal urges, for two, and it be socially acceptable in some way, shape, or form, you know, almost like an anti-hero sort of thing. But, and yeah, who doesn't want to be sexy and seductive and mysterious, you know? But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I, of course, enjoyed very much researching this one because of my interest in vampires. And yeah, so I will see you guys next time. Until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening or morning or whatever this is for you. Stay weird, stay creepy, stay safe, and stay strange. Love you guys. Bye-bye.